My live-in partner of 14 months walked out after saying, "Trust me or don't," expecting me to just accept it. Instead of crying, I used her own system to leave a 4-word note on the kitchen table. She called me vindictive to all our friends, nhưng tin nhắn thoại lúc 3:12 sáng của cô ta đã thú nhận tất cả. My name is Mark. I'm 29. I work as a graphic designer, mostly remote, for a branding agency on the east side of the city. I've had the same apartment for 4 years. It's a decent 1-bedroom, the kind of place you stop noticing after a while because it just becomes yours. Qley moved in 14 months before that night. We'd been together for 2 years total. She brought her oat milk and her specific brand of shampoo and a corkboard she put up above the desk, and inside of 3 weeks the apartment felt like both of ours. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I was not a jealous partner. I had met Jake twice. He seemed perfectly fine. Qley had known him since college. They had their friendship, and I had never made that an issue. I wasn't threatened by it. I wasn't asking her to drop it. That part matters, because it's not the version of the story that gets told later. What I had asked for, once, about 7 months before that night, was a heads up when overnight plans were in the picture. That was the whole request. Not permission, not control, just communication. We were living together. It seemed like a reasonable thing to mention. She looked at me from the passenger seat and said, "You're starting to sound insecure." We were coming back from her parents. It had been a good weekend. I remember the green light we sat at when she said it. I remember deciding to let it go, because I didn't want to turn a decent weekend into an argument over something that hadn't happened yet. She kept the shared grocery list on our phones. Her additions were always there: the oat milk, that shampoo, the specific crackers she liked with hummus. I bought them on autopilot for months without thinking about it. That's the kind of thing that builds up in a relationship, the routine that makes it feel permanent. I had filed that car conversation away somewhere. Told myself it wasn't a pattern. Told myself I was probably being too sensitive. I shouldn't have. The night of the party, Qley was getting ready in the bathroom, and her phone was on the kitchen counter, face up. I wasn't going through it. It buzzed, and I glanced over the way you do when something moves. The message was from Jake. "Gonna crash after? It's your call." The thing that stopped me wasn't the message. It was the response already above it. A thumbs up, sent at 6:52 p.m. It was 7:05 when I asked her about it. I kept my voice even. I told her I'd seen the message while it was face up, and that I'd noticed she'd already replied. I said I wasn't trying to start a fight, I just wanted to understand the plan, because it would have been good to know. Qley turned around from the bathroom doorway and leaned against the frame. She wasn't angry yet. She was something more careful than that. "I'm going to Jake's after the party. That's the plan." I said okay, and asked if we could talk through it for a minute. "I'm not going to justify myself to you." She picked up her phone from the counter. "If I want to sleep over at Jake's after the party, that's my choice. Trust me or don't." I tried once more. I said I wasn't asking her to justify anything. I was asking her to have a conversation with me. She didn't answer. She went back to the bathroom, finished getting ready, and left at 8:14 p.m. She didn't look at me on her way out. The door closed, and the apartment settled into silence. The wine glass she'd poured for a pre-drink was still on the counter, barely touched. I stood there for a little while, and then I let myself think about something I'd been avoiding. The thumbs up had been sent at 6:52. The conversation with me had started at 7:05. She had already decided before I knew there was a decision to make. The conversation was never a conversation. I was just someone she'd informed. After she left, I didn't spiral. I didn't go through her phone. I didn't call anyone. I just sat at the kitchen table and thought. About 13 months earlier, I'd made a reservation at a restaurant called Caruso's. I'd been trying to get us there for almost a year, the kind of place that books weeks out, good pasta, a little more special than our usual spots. I booked it 6 weeks in advance, for our 1-year anniversary. The week before, Jake texted her that he needed help moving. She canceled Caruso's. I said it was fine. We rescheduled twice and then stopped talking about it. About 8 months ago, I woke up at 2 in the morning to a text notification. I saw Jake's name and the time and went back to sleep. In the morning, I mentioned it not as an accusation, just that it had woken me up and I'd found it a little jarring. She set down her coffee. "You're so insecure." She didn't tell me what the message said. I didn't ask again. 5 months ago, I came home on a Thursday evening to find Jake on our couch. Qley hadn't mentioned he was coming. She introduced the situation like it was already understood. Jake was perfectly friendly. He stood up, shook my hand, asked what I did. He was fine. The situation wasn't. When I brought it up with Qley later, she said, "I'm not going to let you police my friendships." 3 moments. Each one I let go. And each one ended the same way. I said something carefully, and somehow I was the problem. The anniversary dinner, I was being too rigid. The 2 a.m. text, I was insecure. The unannounced weekend visit, I was controlling, policing, unable to let her have her own life. She had a word ready every time. And every time, the word was about me. The strange thing is that it worked. Every single time, I absorbed the word and adjusted. I told myself she was passionate about her independence, and I needed to be more secure. I told myself I was probably too sensitive about things that didn't matter. I told myself that the discomfort I felt was my own issue to work through, not something she owed me a conversation about. I got very good at locating the problem inside myself. I sat at the kitchen table that night and let myself do something I'd been avoiding. I counted, and once I counted, I understood that the ultimatum hadn't come from nowhere. It hadn't escalated out of a single bad argument. It was the pattern saying out loud what it had been saying quietly for a year. She wasn't asking me to trust her. She was telling me that my discomfort had never been part of the equation and that she had assumed, correctly until now, that I would find a way to be fine with that. I found the notepad we used for grocery lists. I pulled it off the fridge and sat back down at the kitchen table with the pen. I wrote 4 words. I've chosen don't. I folded the note and put it under the pepper shaker. That was Qley's system. She'd started anchoring notes with something heavy so they wouldn't slide off or blow away when the window was open. I used her system to leave her the note. Then, I went to sleep. She came home at 11 the next morning. I heard the keys, heard her footsteps, heard her stop in the kitchen. Then her voice, "Mark?" I was already at the table with coffee when she came in. She picked up the note from under the pepper shaker, unfolded it, and read it. She looked up. "What is this?" "It means what it says." She stared at me. "You're seriously doing this over one night?" I didn't answer that. She told me I was being dramatic. She said I was overreacting. She said the word controlling at some point. She said she hadn't even done anything wrong, and that if I had trust issues, we should have addressed them a long time ago, instead of her finding out about them like this. I asked her to stay at her friend Lena's for a few days. She left that afternoon. The voice notes started that evening. The first one was calm, measured, almost prepared. She said she understood I was upset but that my reaction had been disproportionate and that she needed me to acknowledge she hadn't done anything wrong before we could move forward. The second one came a few hours later, more frustrated. She said she couldn't believe I'd walked out of a 2-year relationship over one conversation, that I was punishing her for having a male friend, that I needed to think about what I was actually doing. In the days that followed, her version of events found its way to people. I know because some of it came back to me through a mutual friend, through the way certain people went quiet. Her story was that I had abandoned her over a sleepover, that I had trust issues, that I couldn't handle her having male friends, that she'd done nothing wrong and I'd walked out with no warning. She posted something on social media, vague enough to have deniability, something about not justifying yourself to people who don't trust you. It got 47 likes. I didn't post anything. I didn't reply to anything. I had nothing I needed to prove. I listened to all 3 voice notes the day after she left. I sat with coffee and played them back to back. The first 2 were what I expected. The first was composed and careful. She used the word disproportionate twice and ended by saying she hoped I would think it through. The second was angrier. She said I was punishing her for having friendships, that I was throwing away 2 years over one night, that I needed to think seriously about what kind of partner I wanted to be. The third one was different. The timestamp said 3:12 a.m. She was somewhere quiet, almost no background noise. Her voice had changed. The composure from the first message was gone. The frustration from the second one was gone too. It was just smaller than either. "Please come home," she said. "I know I messed up. I was so sure I was right." That was it. The recording ended there. I played it twice. Not to twist anything, I just needed to be sure I'd heard it correctly. She hadn't called me controlling in that one. She hadn't said I had trust issues. She hadn't said she'd done nothing wrong. She said she was so sure she was right. That sentence isn't an apology. It's not "I understand why you were hurt" or "I should have listened." It's something else. It's an admission that she had understood exactly what she was doing when she delivered that ultimatum. She knew she was drawing a line. She knew what was on either side of it. She just genuinely believed I wouldn't cross it. She didn't misread the situation. She misread me. I set down my phone. I sat with that for a while. 7 weeks later, I was at my desk on a Tuesday morning when a notification came in from a woman who'd briefly worked with Qley and still followed me for whatever reason. She'd sent a screenshot with a short note. Thought you might have already seen this. It was Jake's Instagram. He'd posted photos with a new girlfriend, 3 of them together, a restaurant, somewhere outside, one where they were both laughing at something off camera. The caption said, "Finally feels right." I looked at it for maybe 15 seconds. I want to be honest about what I felt. It wasn't triumphant. It was closer to tired, the feeling of watching the last piece of something fall into place when you'd already figured out the picture. Qley had drawn the line exactly where she drew it, over exactly this friendship. And 7 weeks out, this was what that friendship was. The thing she'd been so sure she was right about. I closed the app. I didn't forward the screenshot. I didn't text Qley. I didn't post anything. I just closed it and went back to the client project on my other screen. Whatever it was, I don't remember now. The moment wasn't as significant as I'd once imagined it might be. And then it was just over. I kept the voice notes. All 3 of them. Not for any specific purpose. I just never deleted them. Sometimes you hold on to things without fully knowing why. A week after she left, I called my building manager. I'd been in the apartment for 4 years before Qley moved in. The lease was mine. When she moved in, I'd added her as a secondary occupant, not a co-leaseholder, just formally on the paperwork. The lease had a standard clause for removing secondary occupants. I hadn't known that off the top of my head. I looked it up, and then I called. The building manager walked me through it. Written notice, 2 weeks, nothing complicated. She was professional about it. That evening, I sent Qley a message. I kept it short. I told her I'd spoken to the building manager, that the process was straightforward, and that she had 2 weeks to make a plan. She replied within the hour. "You're being vindictive." I read it once. Then I typed, "This is the lease arrangement. There's nothing left to discuss." I didn't call. I communicated everything through written messages and the building manager. Qley moved her things out on a Tuesday. I was at work. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, exactly, just rearranged. The corkboard above the desk was gone. There were 2 hooks on the wall where her bags used to hang. Her backup shampoo was still in the bathroom. There was oat milk in the fridge that she hadn't taken. I didn't change anything that night. I just made dinner and went to bed. I want to be precise about what the lease removal was. It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a statement. It was the administrative side of a relationship that had ended. She had lived here because we were together. We weren't together anymore. The paperwork needed to reflect that. She called it vindictive. This was the same woman who, at 3:12 inches the morning, had whispered that she'd just been so sure she was right. I noticed the gap between those 2 things. 6 months is a strange amount of time. It's long enough that things settle without you deciding they will. Long enough that you start moving through your own routine without thinking of it as recovery. You're just doing it because it's what you do. I started running again. I dropped it somewhere in the last year of the relationship without noticing, the way you quietly drop things when your life reorganizes itself around someone else. One morning I just put on shoes and went out. It felt less like starting something and more like finding something I'd set down somewhere and forgotten about. I built a route around it. Out early, down 2 blocks, past a coffee shop on the corner called the Grind Independent Place. Good coffee, not too loud. I'd been in twice in 6 months, on slow weekday mornings. I liked it there. It hadn't been ours. It was just mine. When Qley texted and asked if we could meet, I suggested the Grind. She agreed. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. I got there first. Medium black, table near the window. I wasn't nervous. I was curious in a quiet way about what she was going to say and who was going to show up to say it. She arrived a few minutes late. She was dressed a little more carefully than a Saturday coffee usually calls for. I noticed that, and I noticed her notice that I noticed. She went to the counter and ordered her usual oat milk latte, extra shot. She knew the menu. She'd been here before. The place was hers now too, apparently. She sat down, and she didn't ease into it. "I owe you an apology," she said. She meant it. I could hear that she meant it. She said the ultimatum had been wrong, that she'd handled the whole situation badly, that she'd been defensive about Jake in a way that wasn't fair to me. She said she'd been carrying it and she wanted to say it to my face instead of a voice message I might delete. I let her finish. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I really do." She was watching me, waiting for the but. In her version of how this went, there was something still open, some remaining grievance she could acknowledge, some door I needed her to open before I'd let her through. "I've already made peace with this," I said. "That's not a line. I genuinely have. You don't miss any of it?" I paused. I was actually thinking about it. "I miss year one," I said. "That version of us was real." "Then why?" "Because somewhere after year one, we stopped having room for me to feel things without being the problem." I said it evenly. Not as an accusation, just as the accurate thing. "And I don't think I can go back to that. I don't think I'd be able to pretend it didn't happen." She was quiet. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. And I believed her. That's what I want to say clearly. I believed her completely. I don't think Qley sat down and decided to dismiss everything I felt. I think she was so certain her position was right that she genuinely didn't account for what it would mean if I took her at her word. The ultimatum was real. The line was real. I had crossed it. That was all. "I know," I said. "I'm glad you know that now." She didn't have anything after that. Not visibly, she didn't fall apart. Nothing dramatic happened. It was more like a kind of stillness. She'd arrived with something prepared, and the other side of the table didn't have a counter-argument, didn't have an opening, didn't have anything she could push against. The thing she'd come ready for just had nowhere to go. I finished my coffee. I stood up. I put enough on the table for both of ours she hadn't asked me to. I didn't announce it. I just left it there. "Take care of yourself," I said. And I meant it. She didn't say anything as I left. I walked out of the grind and back into the street. It was a cold morning. The kind of cold that feels clean rather than miserable. I had skipped my run to come here, and it was still early enough to go. I went home and changed my shoes and went out. A few weeks later, I found out through a mutual friend named Priya that Qley had described the coffee meeting as cold. I wasn't there for Qley's version of it, so I can only tell you what Priya told me. What Priya had said to her was this: "He paid for your coffee and told you he wasn't angry. That's not cold. That's someone who's already moved on." I don't know what Qley said after that. Priya didn't mention it. What she told me was that Qley hadn't brought it up again after that conversation, not with her, anyway. That's how it ended. Not with a confrontation. Not with anyone being proven wrong in a room full of people. Just with one person saying one accurate sentence and the story quietly running out of space. A coworker asked me a couple months later what had happened with my long-term relationship. She'd heard in passing that I'd moved on. I gave her a sentence and a half. Long-term relationship, didn't work out. We wanted different things. She nodded, and we went back to the project we were supposed to be talking about. That's how much room it took up by then. The shared photo cloud is still technically on my phone. I keep meaning to disconnect it. Her photos stopped appearing in it months ago. She must have removed herself at some point. My feed is just mine now. A sunrise from a Thursday run, a screenshot from a client presentation, my sister's cat doing something ridiculous. The ordinary accumulation of a life that belongs to itself. The grocery list is gone. I canceled the shared note the same day I sent the lease message. But I still buy oat milk. I'm not sure exactly when I started drinking it myself, somewhere in the last 6 months, without deciding to. Some things stay. I think about the relationship sometimes, in the way you do when enough time has passed that it doesn't feel like a wound anymore, more like something you studied once and still remember the shape of. I don't think Qley was a bad person. I don't think I was a perfect one. I think she had a version of what that relationship was supposed to be, and I had a different one, and somewhere in the middle we both kept quiet about it for too long. The difference is that when it finally came to a head, she gave me 2 options, and I picked one. And then there's the pen. I still have it. The one I used to write the note. It's a blue ballpoint, the kind that comes in a 12-pack and has no significance. It's in the kitchen drawer, with the takeout menus and the spare batteries and all the things that don't have a place but also don't get thrown away. I don't know why I kept it. I didn't keep it on purpose. I just never got around to throwing it away. And now enough time has passed that it means something I can't fully explain. She said, "Trust me or don't." I chose don't. And here's the honest answer, the one I've had 6 months to sit with. I'd make the same choice again. Not because it didn't hurt. Not because I wasn't scared of what I was walking into. But because she meant it when she said it, and she deserved someone who would take her seriously enough to do exactly that. So did I.